Welcome Under the Moongate. I'm Erin Bagwell, a developing intuitive medium, awakening witch, and documentary filmmaker. I am sharing what I'm learning about living from the dead, with stories and interviews to inspire us to find the magic within. And I am fired up today because we have a really special episode, and we're going to do things a little bit differently for our episode on aliens with Eleanor Turner. So let me set the table a little bit first. So you know Eleanor, our special guest, from How to Be a Medium, from Witch Holiday Party. She is part of my meditation circle. She's a dear friend of mine. And a little bit more about Elle's background. She worked in fashion in New York City. She flew with Calvin Klein to Fashion Week and worked with Jenna Lyons at J. Crew and resurrected her grandfather's company called The Big Favorite. Her and I connected about a year and a half ago over our spiritual journeys and have been, in pretty close contact since then, sharing, the woo-woo spiritual things that happen to us. And I'm very grateful to have her in my corner. But one thing you got to know about Eleanor is she's going to bring aliens to the table. And when her and I first started having these conversations, I was really struggling with my ability to communicate with the dead. Like, I'm talking to ancestors and ghosts, and I'm trying to process this ability that I have. Now I got to think about galactical energy and aliens. And it took my brain a couple of months of hearing Eleanor's stories and hearing about her research and just kind of listening to the facts and the history to really kind of wrap my brain around it. So the first thing I want to say to our audience is if this topic feels like, whoa, we're going around we're going out to space. I totally hear you, and I want to honor that. And I want to say that that's totally okay. What I would ask of you in this episode is just to kind of remain open-minded. And you can be skeptical and you can, have your feelings about it. But one of the really, really fascinating things and interesting things about this conversation is the congressional hearings that happened. The 2 congressional hearings that happened at the White House with the Department of Defense, with NASA, with naval officers who said, and I quote, "We are not alone in the cosmos." And hearing officials, government officials, speak to the fact that we are not alone really threw another layer into this whole conversation in my mind. And it also made me really question, why in the world aren't we talking about this? If we're hearing from these, very esteemed, influential members of the government that have, access to this information, that are speaking, on the Bible, facing ridicule and condemnation from their coworkers, if they're willing to put their careers on the line, what do they have to say? And why aren't we listening to them? And so I have been following this story mostly, through Eleanor's, curiosity and love for it, and have become really, really open-minded. And my heart has really softened to the fact that there not only is something out there, but that it's something that's going to help us with our consciousness and raise our elevation. And I got to be honest with you, when I started my mediumship journey, one of the strangest things about it, in addition to being able to talk to dead people and have psychic visions and, all the normal weird things, was that sometimes I would feel the consciousness of our collective as humanity. I can tap into almost like our pulse as a human race, ? And kind of get a sense of what's happening. And and I know other mediums can do this, and that's primarily the messages that I channel on TikTok are kind of those general messages. But I only offer that because I'm feeling a great shift. I'm feeling an intense movement towards something. And I hope it's for something good. And I hope it's for something better. And I hope it's for the elevation of our consciousness. And to be honest, that's why I'm on this podcast. That's why I started this show. That's why I started talking about my mediumship. I feel like a channel for having dialogues, for having conversations about stepping into your magic and stepping into your elevation. I want our frequencies to go up, 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 up. I feel like that's why I'm here. And so as we step into this conversation about UAPs and UFOs and non-human entities, I want to offer us a little bit of a safe space to just explore the conversation, to keep an open mind. And throughout the episode, I'm going to be dropping little clips from the congressional hearings, and I'll give you a little, update about who's speaking and what their credentials are. But I think it's really important that we see the full picture now, because we're not just getting, little sightings here and there. The orb sightings are increasing. The drone sightings are increasing. I want us to be open-hearted to this new experience because, as Eleanor and I kind of gush about in the beginning of the episode, this is an exceptional time in human history. I mean, my God, this would change everything. And so I'm so excited and honored to be part of this journey. And I hope you'll enjoy this episode. And thanks, as always, for joining me under the moon gate.
Good morning and welcome to today's historic hearing, which I'm co-chairing with Mr. Grothman, whose subcommittee held an important hearing on this topic last year for their relentless drive to get answers on UAPs. They've been steadfast in demanding transparency on the sightings reported by military pilots and armed forces. Army Colonel Carl Nell, a member of the federal government UAP task force, said at a conference this past May that non-human intelligence exists, non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing, and there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that. But UAPs remain a controversial topic. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain individuals who didn't want this hearing to happen because they feared what might be disclosed. This hearing is intended to help Congress and the American people to learn the extent of the programs and activities our government has engaged in with respect to UAPs. Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Elizondo for his opening statement.
Greetings, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, and members of the committee. It is my honor and privilege to testify before you on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, formerly known as UFOs. On behalf of our brave men and women in uniform and across the intelligence community, as well as my fellow Americans who have awaited this day, thank you for your leadership on this important matter. Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. A small cadre within our own government involved in the UAP topic has created a culture of suppression and intimidation that I've personally been victim to, along with many of my former colleagues. This includes unwarranted criminal investigations, harassment, and efforts to destroy one's credibility. And many of us have subsequently been targeted by this cabal with threats to our careers, our security clearances, and even our lives. This is not hyperbole, but a genuine fact, and this is wrong. If we approach the UAP topic in the same way as we, as Americans, have met other challenges, we can restore our faith in our government institutions. Together, we can usher in a new era of accountable government and scientific discovery. I believe that we as Americans can handle the truth, and I also believe the world deserves the truth.
Hi.
I'm so excited. I literally I have a full page of notes of things that I would like to talk about. I'm excited.
No, I am too. And, I have felt a lot of energy around this topic because I think it's so interesting that in our culture, I was just rewatching the congressional hearings, that we still don't acknowledge their presence. I mean, we have the Department of Defense Cruz Elziondo saying we are not alone in the cosmos, that UAPs are here, are real,
Have been
and
here forever.
nobody is talking about it. Like, what?
Yeah, well, and that's a big part of the notes that I took today because you really have to be committed to it because this
Mhm.
is a deep and storied and very, very complex conversation that has been going on in our government and in America, just in the
Mhm.
context of America for decades and decades. I mean, even before that, centuries and centuries.
I mean, since a tale as old as humanity,
Yes,
people have been talking about the pyramids and,
correct.
our Prometheus and our ability to create
Correct.
fire. I mean, this has been a part of our culture subconsciously,
Correct.
really since the beginning of time. So it's fascinating. I feel like one of the things I'm most excited about is like, this is a incredible time to be alive.
It is.
Like we get to witness this uncloaking of this information that people have been speaking out about and kind of feeling inclinations towards. And it's funny, while I was doing the research, it says that until 2017, that the rumor mill was all anonymous, that we really didn't have public officials from the Navy, from NASA coming forward. And so
Correct.
I feel like when we think about this conversation with UFO, it's like we think about like a farmer who had an experience or this and that. No, 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 no. In the year of our Lord 2025, we're talking about the Department of Defense.
We're talking about the commander of the Black Aces, which is the best pilot in the world. Okay, this person knows what he's talking about when he goes up in a plane and he sees something he can't explain that completely deviates his own, like, I mean, literally, like, this person is so incredibly talented and smart and qualified and credited,
Yes.
and people still want to say what he saw as a balloon. I'm like, bitches, please. You did not see a balloon.
So let's back up a little bit
Yeah.
for
Yes.
people.
Let's do it.
Maybe tell people why you care about this topic. That
Yeah,
let's start
yeah.
there.
That's a big thing for me. The reason I care about this topic is because of climate change. So
Mm.
the root of all of this is a reverse engineering program inside of the US government that has anti-gravity technology. Anti-gravity technology is a source of free energy. It doesn't require output. So like when these uh, craft, right, come here from who knows where,
Yeah.
or even out of the ocean, they don't have any output. They don't have exhaust, which means they're
Mm.
not burning things to create energy. And so you're talking about a complete paradigm shift of the way that we could actually be leveraging energy on this planet.
Wow, Elle.
So let's think about who,
That really just blew my mind. We've been here for
right?
5 minutes.
Yeah. Tell me whose interest it would be in to cover this up and how many billions and billions of dollars would be at stake if we had access to free energy.
Mm. Wow.
Right.
And this isn't just like a hypothesis that you have. I mean, we have a part of the congressional hearings, they've talked about reverse engineering some of the crafts that they have and the technology that they're working with. So we know that if we've seen the technology, it's possible for us to be able to,
Correct.
perhaps make our own energy, as you said, without emissions.
Okay, Mr. Elizondo, has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
Does the U.S. government have any reverse, okay, we already answered that question about.
So what we're talking about is, and people new to this conversation, listening to the first 5 minutes of this, are going to say, oh, this sounds like a conspiracy theory, and I can't go down this rabbit hole. In 2017, that New York Times article by Leslie Kane put on the map these Black programs. This is a fact. There are reverse engineering programs inside the government that exist today that
Hmm.
are being classified and covered up and not talked about. And it's not a conspiracy, it's true. It just
Right.
is the truth. Yeah.
I love that climate change is a part of the way you feel connected to this cause.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how long you've been following these stories and
Yeah.
kind of a little bit more about your personal interest? Because I know it goes deeper than climate change.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, I've always been interested in the topic since I was like a kid. I never had any experiences with it growing up. Like I never saw the phenomenon. I never like was a witness to anything. I just was purely interested in it. I was like, this is fascinating. And I think perhaps listen, we're on your podcast, so I can talk about the stuff that has to do with sort of reincarnation or old soul or having this knowing in your body where you just know something's true.
Mm,
You just can't really explain where that comes from, but you absolutely know it as truth. And I think I've always felt like this is absolutely the truth, that we're not alone in this universe, that perhaps these beings, whatever they are, perhaps it's like a many layered thing where there's some that are physically here and there's some that are interdimensionally here. And so I've always been really interested in the conversation. And I think probably 3 years ago is when it really started ramping up. I started reading books by Diana Pasulka, and she actually is a professor of religious studies at UNC Wilmington. And she was writing a book on purgatory, but she got access to the Vatican archives. And
mm,
she started seeing all of this stuff inside of the archives that sounded like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She's like, okay, Ezekiel's wheel, like look at the stigmata of St. Francis and how he saw lights in the sky and how it maybe gave him radiation burns.
mm,
She started just pulling all of this information. She actually wrote a book called American Cosmic that really draws the parallels between religious spirituality and the phenomenon. And
mm.
that's when I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense to me. And I just fully immersed myself back into the conversation. Um, at that point, there were the hearings happened, the congressional hearings happened. There was just another one recently. There have been a number of credible articles. The platforms of the people who have been researching this stuff for decades are exploding right now. And obviously now we've got the drones and the Dior bags flying around, not just in New Jersey, but actually globally. So that's a little bit of history on my end. I will say, if there's any piece of content that comes out about this stuff that feels credible, or there's a credible witness or whistleblower, like I listen to all of it. And I think that there's a learning there where, especially when you're deeply looking into this subject, always go back to the witnesses because
Mm.
critics will spin a story and they'll say, "Oh, well, that's inconsistent and like it's probably swamp gas and da da da." This goes all the way back to the CIA's implementation of something called Project Blue Book, which actively discredited people's stories.
Yeah, they talk about that in the congressional hearing about
Yes,
that there was a government agency whose job was to kind of retaliate and spin stories. So
correct.
it's very interesting that and I think one of the reasons I want to back up a little bit in saying that one of the reasons that these naval officers and Department of Defense people are coming forward is that there is no regulation to these organizations, right? Because they're classified, they get to kind of run wild and do whatever they want.
Yes,
And what these officers are asking, or retired officers are asking for, is some kind of regulation, some
correct.
kind of system, some kind of process, and also not to be retaliated against if they do speak up. Because there is this gray area where it seems like they're saying, if you say anything, you get your wrist slapped, or you might get your
Not just that.
credentials taken away, or you might
Yeah,
get threatened because it's classified.
correct. In fact, David Grush, who was the assigned communications person on this. Well, he was the investigator, but he was the one who first testified in front of Congress back in, I think it was just after the New York Times story dropped. But he was retaliated against.
Yeah.
He lost his clearances. I'm pretty sure that means like when you lose your clearances, you lose your livelihood. His home was broken into. Um, there were like major threats against he and his family. So this is a very serious thing, and people have to consider that before they come out about this. It's scary.
Yeah, well, I'm a daughter. I don't really talk about this a lot, but I'm a daughter of a military retired lieutenant colonel. And so one thing I do know is kind of the systems in which officers and the culture in which they're brought up to kind of serve and protect certain spaces of authority. And what really got my attention was hearing from the naval admirals who really just wanted to protect their men. And that felt so in alignment for me of like these men aren't going to go out of their way to ruin their careers and step out of line. Like the being in
Right.
the military is part of being in the process. They very
Yeah.
much know that. And so that for me was like, oh, this is a story I need to pay attention to.
So I will first recognize Rear Admiral Gallaudet to please begin your opening remarks.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify today regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP. Confirmation that UAPs are real came to me in January of 2015 when I was serving as the commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. At the time, my personnel were participating in a pre-deployment naval exercise off the U.S. East Coast. During this exercise, I received an email on Navy's secure network from the operations officer of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The email was addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, "Urgent Safety of Flight Issue." The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise." Attached to the email is what is now known as the Go Fast video. The now declassified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The implication of the email was clear. The author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of classified technology demonstrations that could explain these objects. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation. Moreover, the commander of Fleet Forces Command and the operations officer never discussed the subject. This lack of follow-up was very concerning to me. As the Navy's chief meteorologist at the time, I was responsible for reducing safety of flight risks. Yet it appeared to me that no one at the flag officer level was addressing the safety risk posed by UAPs. Instead, pilots were left to mitigate these threats on their own without guidance or support. Last year's UAP hearing also revealed that elements of the government are engaged in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Having never signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding UAPs, and now as a private citizen, I've become an advocate for greater UAP transparency from the government.
Why do you think the American people as a culture are not really like receiving this information? Like if you were to talk to the average person and say, you know, the government has confirmed that we're not alone in the cosmos,
Yeah.
like direct quote, I
Yeah.
don't think people would say, oh, yeah, I got that. Why
Yeah.
do you think it's so, I don't know, is it taboo? Why aren't we speaking about it more?
I mean, I think it's twofold. It's ontologically shocking for people.
Mm,
It's really about like, if that is true, what is my life gonna be like on the other side of that?
right.
So there's this shielding of like, I don't really want to talk about that.
I can't, it's too overwhelming.
Too overwhelming. I don't know what that's gonna change for me. So
Mm.
I'm just not gonna address it. I'm not gonna bring it in.
For people who are feeling that, what is your advice to them about receiving this information?
Well, it's
If
about
people
to
are
be,
sitting here going, oh my gosh, I'm a little, like, this is a little much.
yeah. Um, if you think it's a little much now, it's going to be much more very soon.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's worth opening yourself up to the conversation so that you don't feel fear when it
Hmm.
is thrust into your right in front of your face.
I think for me, that is the anchor of this conversation because I feel like what I am learning more and more is that our world and our culture specifically love to divide us. They love to say, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're this, you're that, you're from California, you're from New York. And if anybody is trying to divide us, it feels like a red flag has gone up. Like now I just call bullshit.
Yep.
And with this conversation, it's like actually we don't have any of the information. We have bits and pieces. And so the division is fostering fear, is fostering
Correct.
confusion.
Correct.
And so I don't want to live in alignment with fear in any capacity.
No.
And so when I look at this conversation, I think, okay, well, what do we really know? What are we really putting together? And something that provides me a lot of solace when I'm learning from you or listening to these things is that we actually haven't heard these admirals and these officials talk about violence. If the technology is so much more advanced, it would be no competition for them to
Correct.
cause major destruction, to start a war, to have this be already something that's ongoing if these encounters are so frequent. So
Correct.
that to me says that they're not interested in that, that that's not where energetically it is. Like,
Yeah. Well, look, I'll say this too. And this is something that came through earlier. It was like your experience with the phenomenon is a direct result of how much fear you hold inside yourself. So there's two sides to every coin, right? Like I could be standing out in my backyard and I could see a spaceship and I could be like, "Oh my God, it's so crazy and I'm scared," and I run away and I hide under my bed, right?
sure.
Or I could stand out there and I could say, "Hey, what's going on?" And like, what if some aliens came down and we're just like hanging out in my backyard? Um, Ontologically, for us physically, that would be an incredibly shocking experience to have. It would be really scary because you're not used to seeing this stuff. That's why whenever people are like, "Oh, why don't they just come land on the White House lawn?" Right? Like, I'm like, well,
People's
they
brains
can't.
would explode.
Your
Yeah.
brain would explode.
Yeah.
But if you were really, if you could really just be there and talk to them and say, hey, what's going on? Like, they'd probably tell you, listen, here's how we can improve your quality of life, your living situation, how you use energy, how you consume, like, but nobody's doing that, right? Well, there actually are a few people doing that, and I can talk about that in some of my favorite stories, but yeah.
Yeah. So my theory with the drones and with what's happening with everybody, and I love that you're calling it the phenomenon. That's what a gorgeous title. Um, is that did I ever send you the TikTok about like the monkeys washing their fruit?
Yeah, yeah, the hive mind.
Yes. So like the idea is that like once one group understands something, like these monkeys on an island washed their fruit, and even though they were on an island, all the other monkeys around the world started washing their fruit. That once the consciousness elevated with one community, it got passed on. And so my theory is that all of these drone and orb experiences are happening to elevate our consciousness so that we can be
Yeah,
open to receiving, bigger messages down the line.
I love that. I love that. I totally
Because you're
agree.
right. They can't land on the White House lawn and have people kind of go upside down.
No, people would like get their guns and shoot at it. Like it would just not be productive. And these beings are so much more advanced than we are, and they have strategies, and this is part of the strategy. And
Hmm.
there are going to be active people on the other end trying to cover it up. So here's the paradox that we live in.
I know. And it's so, what a bummer, you know? It's like we're living in this really exciting time and people are, wanting the information not to come out and to silence people. And it's such like, I don't know. It's a
hmm
bummer.
It's disappointing. It's disappointing
Yes.
because you can see the potential of this mindset and how it would change the world, how it would, I mean, completely shift our paradigms of living and what's important.
Mm.
And instead, like they'd rather keep us, in this endless cycle of consumption and just like destroying ourselves.
Well, I can also see the powers that be, not to cast tons of judgment, but not wanting to lose control of power. Like if we live in a society that has a president, that has an executive branch, and then all of a sudden we have beings that come to our earth that are much more advanced. I mean, you're right, that would shake up,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and by
the
the
way we
way,
view everything.
really the reason that they started coming here was because in the 1940s, we developed the atomic bomb. And once we started to split the atom, it didn't just affect this physical world, it affected dimensional worlds.
Mm,
So we were not only destroying ourselves, we were destroying other dimensions
right.
by using this technology. And so they started coming because they're like, okay, this is the only time we can intervene. Like we can intervene when it's a bigger threat to the larger universe.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's why they started coming here.
When you say other dimensions, do you mean other dimensions in other galaxies or other dimensions on Earth
Well,
or both?
it depends on what you think
Believe?
a dimension is. Where does a dimension live? Like if I could cut through our dimension
Hmm.
right next to it, where would it be? Would it be Jupiter? Would it be other universes? Would it be the fairies that live in the trees? Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Hmm.
don't know. Yeah, but I will say that like when we fuck around, we find out and they started coming.
So, do you think if that's historically our relationship, are we fucking around right now? Is that why they're coming back?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, tensions have never been higher. Think about like what's happening in the Middle East.
Right.
With Syria and Iran. I mean, there's a lot of destabilization there. Israel, they all have nukes. That's not a surprise. And then, they're very well, I mean, in my theory, I think they're moving nuclear weapons to the East Coast to Picatinny Arsenal. It's like one of the biggest arsenals on the East Coast of the US.
Where's Picatinny?
It's where all this started in New Jersey. Correct.
Oh.
Yeah. So there could be, because there was movement there, there
Mm.
could have been, that could have been like a warning or a flag to these craft.
You're familiar with the recent drone incursion over Langley Air Force Base?
Yes, sir.
The owners of these drones remain unclear. The U.S. military has not been able to give us in Congress an answer. Given your experience with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, how frequently are UAP sightings over military installations?
Yes, sir. There's definitely enough data to suggest that there is certainly some sort of relationship between sensitive U.S. military installations, also some of our nuclear equities, and also some of our Department of Energy sites. There is a long historical record that some of your colleagues may have, documentation that demonstrates this. This is not a new trend. This has been going on for decades, and that information has been obfuscated, unfortunately, from folks like you in this committee.
What are things people need to know? Like if somebody were to come up to them and say, these things are really dangerous and we should be really afraid of them, and, like the
Do not,
government says they're awful, like how should we be feeling and responding and thinking about these things?
for too long, we have reverted our decision-making power to government. And I can say this to your audience because they're going to know what I'm talking about, but like we have to be in our bodies. We have
Mm,
to understand truth from our own perspective, not from a place of, fear or reliance on someone else to tell you what's true. Like we need to know what's true. And if you can't automatically make that assumption on like, okay, is this scary or is it not scary? Um, Slow down, get in
mm.
your body, ask yourself critical questions like, is this thing coming after me? Is it coming after humans? Like, if it was a threat, we would have been gone a long time ago. And by the way, If it was a threat, we would never even know they were here. It wouldn't be worth their time to even come here. They would send some like, you know, disease that would just wipe us out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's not a threat. So anybody who's gonna say anything about this that's like fear-based or trying to scare you or trying to increase budgets for the DoD, like absolutely not. Just that's not it. That's not the narrative.
Can we talk about TikTok?
Sure.
So, something interesting that has happened in my household is my husband, obviously he knows I'm a medium, and we have some woo-woo conversations. And I would say he's got his spiritual door ajar.
Hmm.
He's not, you know,
A crack. It's a little
it's a
crack.
crack. It's a crack. And so we talk about the ancestors. He believes in life after death. However, he's like, Aaron, I can't do aliens. I can't hold space for aliens. Now, this was a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago, actually. And then we got on the TikTok and I'm showing him the orbs and I'm showing him the encounters and I'm showing him the, Joe Schmo smoking a cigarette, being like, what the hell is that thing in my backyard? And he is like, wow,
Yeah.
this is so interesting. And all of a sudden, we're having these beautiful conversations about consciousness and spirituality and what this could mean for humanity and just these beautiful conversations. And I think it has to do with TikTok. It's almost like the town square. You
Mhm.
don't need any credentials, you don't have to be a celebrity. And because people are showing their faces and because we're good at calling bullshit, I think it's a place where people are really able to understand not even the truth, because I don't want to say like it's a blanket statement, but understand other people's experiences.
Correct. Go back to the experiences of people.
And how fascinating, Al, how fascinating that our government that can't decide on a goddamn thing.
Nope.
I mean, and we can go off about that, decided that this 100% cannot exist anymore.
Right.
Off the heels of Mark Zuckerberg donating $1 million for
Correct.
Instagram, by the way. So,
Correct.
woo, what do we got to say about
Now,
TikTok?
now you know. Now you see. And I think that's what's been like not only has it been a gateway for like the UAP conversation, it's been a gateway for so many other things. And I think like when I first got on it, I was like, I don't know, I don't trust China because I don't. And I'll give you many, many reasons for that on another podcast. But it really brought me further down into this world of consciousness
Mm,
and what it means to be human and these spiritual conversations, which really ladder up to the phenomenon itself.
yeah,
And it has been a critical platform
critical.
for people's experiences. I mean, you can't tell me that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across the globe who have had these experiences are all lying or delusional. It's just not, that's just not it. So it has been a critical platform for opening people's eyes and minds.
I'm reminded of the conversations that we've had when we both first started our spiritual journeys around feeling a little confused and conflicted. And
Mhm.
I've heard other mediums talk about, when they started hearing their ancestors whisper to them, it was scary and people felt afraid. And I certainly have felt like I've needed to understand the boundaries of my abilities and really understand and step into them. And I think if people are going to take away anything from this episode, it's that being able to securely and confidently know themselves,
Correct.
know their values, know their ideals, and know their spiritual understanding of the world is going to help them live in the world as we know it. And that things are changing, things are shifting, and things are opening up. And I think as humans, we're always afraid of change.
Yeah.
We're always nervous that something's going to come along. But I think if we can lean on that old adage of best and highest good, if things are happening for us, how can we lean in a little bit more and be a little bit more curious?
Yeah.
Because these stories are not going to go away.
No.
They're going to continue to be shared, but they're also going to continue to be fear-mongered. And they're going to be used against us to control us, to sell us something, to keep power structures that no longer serve us
Correct.
upright. So let's be vigilant about what we think and how we feel and do your own research. And we're going to add 1,000 links to this article that people can get into a deep dive and understand and make their own opinions.
Yes. Yeah. There really are some fascinating stories out there that people should just go read about. And there's documentaries, and it's just really incredible. And most of it is insanely beautiful. And I think that that's the big message that we had talked about before we even started recording, but grounding,
Mm.
grounding in the earth, and understanding that you are supported as a part of this ecosystem, as a part of the larger universal one, and that this time, this shift is really about our survival as a species. And it's all benevolent. It's all for our greatest good. And it may seem like it may be shocking to a lot of people. Just remember, like, you are divine, you are protected, you are grounded, you are guided.
I just had a beautiful conversation with Sky Alexander, who's a spiritual author. And one of the things that she said to me, which has really like been tattooed on my heart, is that she walks around in her physical body, but that's not who she really is.
Yeah,
She's a spirit.
correct.
And so I think also when we think about expanding ourselves as a spirit
Yeah,
and as our higher self, it can make acclimating some of the stuff a little bit more tender too.
yeah.
Because
I
we're
mean,
getting in touch with different parts of us and we're expanding.
yes. And in that vein, I'll just say, like, there were some really cool things that did come out of our CIA, one of which is the Gateway program, which is what now the Monroe Center carries on in Virginia. And that is, or it was developed to teach people how to remote view. And that remote viewing is just another word for psychic. So essentially, our government was trying to develop psychic spies, and they developed the Gateway program that helped. It's called hemisync, and it helps your brain, your right and left side of your brain, get into synchronization so
Mm.
that you can see things in
Channel and receive
channel.
information.
Exactly. That is one of the things that's come out of this that I think is like the most beautiful piece of all of it, is that we are able to connect already. Like, we don't need the government necessarily to disclose things to us, because there are so many people out there, including ex-government officials, who work on this stuff. There's the Bigelow, I think it's the Bigelow Center for Consciousness. There's Monroe Institute in Virginia. There's so many different organizations that are helping to research this, to investigate, to establish protocols, to find proof. And this is the way that we connect in. It's not going to be through like our president or somebody from the DoD. Like, the way that we connect with other civilizations and other non-human intelligence, that's another thing you'll hear in these congressional hearings, is NHI, non-human intelligence, because they won't tell you it's an alien, but they won't tell you it's not an alien. So it's non-human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the way that we connect in is heart-brain coherence, is meditation, it's through the astral, it's in dreams. And so I think like that's the stuff that I lean into, because disclosure may never happen on behalf of our government.
What's the key takeaway, just a few seconds, about the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today?
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
High res.
images, high resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands.
If somebody's listening to this and they're like, I love where this conversation is going, I have no idea what these gals are talking about, but I'm into it, where would you lead them first? Is there a book or a documentary, or what's the what's step two after this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, like you have to have a lot of interest in this to really go deep because it goes so deep, y'all. Like we're talking eons and eons, right? Like of information, of accounts, of stories. Where I would go after this, I would say go read Diana Pasulka, American Cosmic. Really, really beautiful book, beautifully researched. It goes very deep on the spiritual side of this, but then it also goes deep on the government side of this
Mm.
and told through her own experience and discovery process. So I love that book. I think that's amazing. Jacques Vallée. So in France, people talk about this openly. Like it's not as taboo as it is here, and in other countries. Like it's not taboo in South America. Like in indigenous
Well,
cultures,
health
like
insurance is taboo here. Like, good God.
I mean, indigenous cultures throughout the world talk about this all the time. So like you can go back to any sort of Native American prophecy, like they'll talk about star people. In fact, a lot of the temples, ancient temples around the world are aligned with the stars like Sirius and Orion and et cetera, et cetera. So there's also George Knapp. He is like the premier UFO researcher. He just released a documentary on Netflix called Investigation Alien. That was pretty good, although the first three episodes I felt were a bit fear-mongery. Steven Spielberg is
Heard of
amazing.
him?
Okay, he did a documentary series on Netflix. I sent that to you for our
Yes, I
last
have it.
episode. I
Hmm.
forget what's it called again?
The documentary series.
Encounters. I think it's
Encounters, yeah.
Encounters. So good. Like so amazing. Talks about the aerial school encounter in Zimbabwe where these kids were approached by the aliens. Like beautiful story. The aliens were like, "You guys, you're destroying your planet. You need to do better by your planet and the animals on it and all of the beings on it." Like they gave this such beautiful wisdom to these kids.
Hmm.
And even a Harvard researcher went and like studied this phenomenon and talked to all the kids. And he's, what was he? He was some sort of like doctor of psychology. And he was like ousted from Harvard for even publishing like papers and studies on this. It was just like insane, but beautiful story. Go listen to that. And then another one is Stephen Greer. He's always talked about this phenomenon, but as being benevolent, he was the very first, I guess you could call him like he briefed the government on these Black programs. He was the very first one. He was doing this like 30 years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's a lot of information out there.
The other thing is, if you're listening to this conversation on the other hand and you're like, this is so me, I'm very comfortable here in this space. Our friend Kara Daniels has done a beautiful star seed meditation where you can meet your star family. And
Yes.
if that's something that feels in alignment and you'd like to perhaps connect with your
Yeah.
spiritual guides, maybe from galactical energy, that's available to you too.
Yes. Oh, also, I'll say Chris Bledsoe's story. I love him. His story is so amazing.
Tell us about him. I know you've
Um,
spoken about him, but I don't know anything about him.
well, it's so interesting because he's like the most researched UFO experiencer in this country. He had an experience back in January of 2008 where he has missing time and
Hmm.
he was with family like on a like going fishing and he went just quickly for like a walk in the woods for like 10 minutes. He was like, "Oh, I'll be back," like whatever.
Yeah.
And 4 hours later, he shows up and he had like the most incredible story of seeing three orbs in the sky. And then he only under hypnosis did he remember like what was said and that he was taken by a star family. Well, this set off a series of events for him that like at that time completely destroyed his life. I mean,
Mm.
they were part of a Pentecostal church. They would like try to go to church and people would throw holy water on them because they're like, "You're demonic, like we don't know what you're
Mm.
talking about." Then a few years later, he had an amazing experience with a being that called itself Hathor, which is the Egyptian deity, like divine feminine,
Hmm.
who came through with the totem of a bull and showed herself physically to him and gave him all these prophecies and told him that he was going to be a part of the awakening on planet Earth. Told him just incredibly beautiful story of a man who just at his lowest point experienced all these crazy things, and then all of a sudden on the other side of it, CIA is knocking on his door, the FBI is knocking on his door. His whole family is having experiences with the phenomenon. He has the ability to perform miracle healing on
Hmm.
people. The crazy thing is, you won't find his story anywhere because it's like
Mm.
I have a feeling that they don't want people to know about him. Incredible prophecy goes back to ancient Egyptian. I mean, it's just really incredible. He wrote a book called UFO of God. Amazing book. Please go read that.
Okay. Adding
Um,
it to queue.
yeah, Chris Bledsoe. And you follow him on social media. He can call orbs in. Literally, he sits at night on the beach with groups of people in Wilmington, North Carolina, and he calls these things in and he films them. In fact, they did a show
Well,
on it.
let's go.
They did a show on it on the History Channel, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and they filmed it for like national TV, all to see that
Mm-hmm.
he can do this. He can call them in, and they confirmed that they're anomalous. Like they don't know what they don't register as a plane or a satellite or anything. So it's beautiful.
Every night I look out my window over overlooking
Yeah,
the snow hill and I say, "Are you out there? I'm
yeah,
available. I'd
yeah,
love to see you."
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing they say that, and this was my experience recently, that if you just humbly ask for it, or in my case, like I said, like, I don't really need to see you because I know you're there, but maybe at some point, and then right after I said that in my head, I saw an orb above me in the sky. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. And it was like witnessing heaven. Like that's why I know these things are benevolent. Without a shadow of a doubt, I know that they're here to help us.
Can you describe the experience more?
Yeah. So I'd let my dog out like very early. And this morning it was particularly early for her. It was like 6 a.m. And we get a lot of flight traffic here, but not at that point in the morning. It's too early.
Mm.
Typically it starts around like 7. And so I'm out in the backyard and I'm just kind of looking up at the sky and I'm meditating. And I said to myself, I said, I always ask for a sign and then I'll see a bird or then I'll see a shooting star and then I'll doubt it and I'll just kind of
Mm-hmm.
go about my day, whatever. And I just said to them, well, I know you're there, so I don't really need a sign. And then all of a sudden, I look up and I see this light in the sky. And I think to myself, because this is what you do, you're like, is that a plane?
Mm-hmm.
And then it traveled like on a different, there's known flight paths around here. Okay. So it traveled completely toward me.
Mm.
And it stopped in the sky. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what? That cannot be a plane.
Weird.
That cannot be a satellite. Like things don't move like that. Then it started moving a little bit to the left. Then it started moving a little to the right. And I was like, okay, that's definitely not how anything moves. Then it got really bright,
Mm.
very, very bright, like a star. And it was white. It was a white orb. And it split into two.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, that's crazy because when you know as much as I do about UFO experiences, typically UFOs will have what they call a chaser.
Okay.
So it's like a secondary light source that kind of like moves around the primary light source.
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh my God, it's the chaser. This is so
Mm.
crazy." And it's moving a little bit, like moving a little bit, and then it just disappeared.
Mm.
And I fell to my knees and cried because it was beautiful. And the feeling that I got from it was this is heaven. This is something angelic. This is something that, I probably, like, my little peon brain doesn't really understand, but my heart understands it.
Mm.
And it just, and then a couple months later, everybody starts seeing orbs, and I'm like, oh my God, like, they're here, and I can't deny it. Can't deny it. And
Why am I crying from this story?
because it's beautiful, because they're here to help. We're
Uh,
like, this is what we've been asking for. Thank you, Jesus. Like,
mm,
so
wow.
yeah, it's
I
really,
love that you had the reaction to it, like emotionally in your heart. I think that's a really, I guess it just also reminds me of when I go to places, in the astral or in the spirit world where you feel like unconditional love and you
yeah,
feel that sense of release as a human and you really feel embodied in your spirit self. It
yeah,
sounds like that and it
yeah,
sounds really beautiful.
yes. It absolutely was. It was like being seen and witnessed by pieces of yourself that you never knew existed out there in the universe. And it was like it was almost like this weird sense of like homecoming, like a
Mm.
just like heart opening, complete flood of emotions. And all I could say, and I like ran inside after a period of time because I was like, can I say this to people? And they were like, not immediately. And I was like, but can I say this to my husband? Because I feel like this is important. And they're
Did you
like,
text me 5 minutes later?
yeah. Yeah, I was like, there's got to be a few people that I can say this to. So yeah, I ran in and I was like, the only thing I could really describe was like, it was like heaven.
Mm,
It was really amazing. So
I love that.
yeah,
Well,
they're
I'm
here.
available. I'm ready.
And then say thank you when they do show up. Make sure you
Yes,
thank them.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. You know what? I am proud of myself because when we first started having these conversations, probably about a year ago, maybe ish,
Yeah.
I don't think I was ready. We would
Yeah.
talk about it and I was like, no, I don't want to see. I don't want to see. I'm not emotionally available yet. I can't do it. And
Hmm.
now I am. You've got me there.
Hmm. Amazing. I'm so glad. I hope this podcast does it for others too.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I hope we can
Yeah.
get a couple more to open their hearts a little bit and see what's going on.
Yeah. That's the whole point is like we've got to raise awareness on this stuff. So I'm excited to see their response. And by the way, if anybody listening is like, I really want to go deeper and have a conversations about this, like just DM me because I
Oh,
will literally get
please.
on the phone with
Al
anyone.
will just she's our resident alien expert, but you can ask her any questions you want. Absolutely. Go find her. Send her some resources, send her your TikToks before it's too late.
Yeah, seriously.
Amazing. Al, thank you so much for being under the moon gate. What a time
Thanks
we
for having
had.
me. Thanks for
This
having
was really fantastic. Where can people find you? Tell them about the Say More podcast. Tell them about all your things.
Um, at the @the_L Turner on Instagram, at the big favorite if you want some super soft Pima Cotton basics, and more chat about finding your authentic purpose, because we do that over there. And then for even more chat about your authentic purpose, go to the Say More podcast, because truly, like beyond the technology, the way that we rebalance the planet is by stepping into our authentic purpose. We have to, we all came here for something unique. And if we all step into that, then the planet would be in its totality, in its balance, in its integrity.
Completely. And I feel like it's been so exciting watching your journey evolve. And as you continue to go deeper, I'm just so excited to bear witness to it.
I can't wait to look back at this in like 10 years. And I'm like, where will I be? Like, will I be in like some yurt somewhere with like
She'll be on
feathers
the
on my
moon.
head and like, yeah, maybe on the moon or
Definitely.
Jupiter.
Okay.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Mr. Gold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, Representative Moskowitz, and distinguished members of both subcommittees. I'm grateful to all of you, as well as your intrepid staff, for the opportunity to testify, and would like to begin by discussing courage. Courage is what it takes to tackle this topic, And courage in the face of adversity is what I see in front of me, beside me, and behind me. It is always difficult for breakthroughs and new information, regardless of whether it's UAP or any other kind of discovery. And in science, we're supposed to be open, but when you break with the orthodoxy of what's believed, it's always challenging for new beliefs. And the more extraordinary those discoveries, the more extraordinary those new beliefs, it's very difficult. So I think this is natural. There's natural conservatism that when it comes to science, but this issue in particular has been very difficult where, again, even to attempt to study it becomes problematic. But every hearing like this, every news report, every brick in the wall will help get us closer to getting to the truth.
Under the Moongate is produced and hosted by me, Erin Bagwell, with music by Sal Mastrocola. To get bonus episodes, links to my workshops, and new episodes delivered to your inbox, join me as a Substack subscriber at underthemoongate.substack.com. To book a digital reading with me, submit a question for our Q&A episode, or RSVP to our next live event, scroll down in the show notes to get all the links. And pass the magic along. Share this episode with a friend. It would mean the world to me. Thanks so much for listening.